Thank you, Julia. Okay.
Thank you, and welcome to our second EELISA Knowledge Bites. So my name is Julia Rosenbusch from FAU, and I'm very happy that you decided to use your precious lunchtime to gain and share some knowledge with us. So our EELISA Knowledge Bites is an online event series where experts from the different EELISA universities give talks on topics that matter than building, growing, and teaching in an EELISA community. So it's primarily targeting at community members and those who are interested in becoming one. But of course, it is also open for anyone who's interested in an educational topic. And for those of you who have no idea what EELISA actually is about, please visit our website, elisa.eu. So we're about to start. Just a short notice, please feel free to eat and drink during the presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat or raise your digital hand, and Emrah or myself will answer your questions. But now, enough from my side. I'm very happy to welcome Emrah Acar from ITU, who will give us some insights on the ITU Learning Station model. So again, hello, Emrah, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much for joining us today. You are welcome all. I'm the project manager for ITU ELISA team. I'm an architect. I have been working on emergency architecture and project management field, but I'm also very much interested in the way individuals and organizations learn for a very long time. So I will share today my experience regarding a model which we actually use when we work with undergraduate students, graduate students, some external companies, and some other external actors to build communities of learning. Actually, I will show some examples today. In my view, that can be a very interesting input when we build ELISA communities and when we work with different internal and external stakeholders of ELISA. That was part of, okay, that's the summary which I have already shared with you when you registered for the event. There are a couple of keywords here, and at the end of this presentation, I hope to combine these pieces, okay? And perhaps I may start with a short historical context. Another keyword, communities of learning. Active learning is a very critical keyword, and yes, arrangement of the learning landscape of the higher education institutions is another important one. So, okay, there are pieces, it's like a puzzle, but I hope we will combine them, okay, at the end of the presentation, hopefully. So this is an evolutionary process. I mean, our learning landscape and the places we learn have been continuously evolving for a very long time, and there is indeed a very strong relationship between how we learn, where we learn, and how we produce goods and services. I mean, the production systems. So in line with the needs of the society, in line with the needs of the industries, the settings have been changing continuously. But there are some important milestones here. I will not, of course, go into the details, but they all had significant impacts on the way, okay, we work in higher education institutions, or we design structures for these organizations, like the introduction of the elective course system, or the efforts for the standardization of the high school curricula, for example, in the late 19th century, early 20th century. For sure, the introduction of the credit system, it was a very important milestone, because conceptually it can go to any direction in terms of designing curricula and designing our governance structures in higher education institutions. And of course, we have the industrial era, right? Because it's also relating the political, social developments that surrounded the world, like the rise of the nation states. Okay, many of them were like imagined societies and things like that, because we needed people with lots of people with uniform skills, so that we could benefit from their labor force and things like that. But things started to change, especially in the mid-20th century, and the way we learned, the places we learned also changed, and I've just placed a few of them. There are many others like that. We can easily add new ones in the digital era. This also overlaps with the rise of, for example, multinational companies, and the weakening of national states, etc. All these, in a way, were part of our educational experience. So the places of injection, let's say, transformed into and are transforming into places of experience, places of active learning. I will talk about that, but it basically means that we have to transfer, we have to delegate the authority to learn to learners. I mean, that's perhaps one of the main issues about using innovative pedagogies in education. But I can say that all around the world, as people, as students, academics, and our stakeholders, we are trying to find answers. We are seeking answers to a couple of questions, which are also very much relevant to our ELISA experience, in my view. Like, how can we design a flexible system that recognizes multiple forms of learning? Because we don't learn in traditional classrooms only, right? There are many different channels from which we can enrich our learning experiences. Another question is, how can we design an agile and flat administration system that can respond more quickly to change and demand from industry? How can we cope with the irrelevancy or skills gap problem? How can the universities support the lifelong learning efforts of individuals? And another important, how can we build a university system that is embedded in society? Or how can we create universities without walls? We can increase them, but especially these questions fall into the scope of my presentation today. This is why, I have a little narrowed my scope, but I can say that many institutions around the world are seeking answers for these questions. So I worked as the Associate Director of the Learning Center for 2 years in the past. So I stepped down a couple of years ago, but that was really a very valuable experience for me to, I have been thinking on educational issues and the learning issue for a very long time, but that was a very valuable opportunity to, let's say, structure things or think in a more systematic way. And we also sought answers for those questions because we were aware of the dissatisfaction of our students, not just students, also academics, from the mass education system, because the world is changing very quickly, and diversity or individual or specific demands of individuals are gaining importance. So how can we address those expectations? So that was the question. So there are many problem areas, but we focused on 2 of them, especially. One of them was inadequacy to address the diverse learning needs and expectations of individuals, inadequacy to benefit from the potentialities of human resources. I think that was really very important because everyone has different skills, everyone has different experiences in life. They have social networks, they have technical capabilities and so on, but how can we benefit from this potential? The current system does not allow that. The answer for that, of course, there are not, single answers for these questions, but within the context of this presentation, one important answer for ITU Learning Center was developing a database. We call it BNOM. B is the symbol of ITU, and we combine it with genome, so it became BNOM. It is the knowledge genome of ITU. The idea was simple. We said, if we develop a database for human resources analytics, we can monitor the learning tendencies and expectations of individuals, and we can engage with them more easily. So the idea was especially engaging with different segments of the ITU ecosystem, and we hoped to target, specific groups, so we could arrange targeted learning activities, and also personalization of learning was one of the learning outcomes. The first row, the first row is the main, my main focus of interest in this presentation, but I can say that it had three elements. The other one was developing a project management capacity within ITU, because we had some statistics that both students and academics needed support in terms of developing, building project management skills, because at the end of the day, we realize many ideas, we put them into practice by means of project management skills. So this is why we collaborated with Project Management Institute, and we worked with the last year engineering students from different departments, and that was a very interesting experience, but that's a separate issue. And finally, the third one is developing a portfolio management capacity for the Learning Center, because it's not just projects, but it's a collection of projects and programs. So in terms of, transferring lessons learned amongst these projects, developing a portfolio management is also very critical for any learning center. So that was the target of the third element, but I will focus on the first one today. So, BNOM is something like that. The question is, how can we efficiently benefit from the potential of ITU ecosystem? Staff, both academic and non-academic, and most importantly, externals, basically the potential of the members of the alumni network. So the problem was we were not able to track these people. This is why we began to develop a database. In general, such systems are known as human resources analytics, but if you narrow its scope, we can name it as learning analytics if you are interested in learning analytics. But once you have this information, you can use it in many different ways to engage with your stakeholders. You can personalize learning activities and so on. But first of all, you have to access the profile information of these people, and you have to understand their expectations. So that's the general structure of this database when it was piloted. We have information about the profile of these actors. The second part was including information about their roles. So it's totally a bottom-up process. People specified which roles they can take. They can exchange with other members of the ITU ecosystem. That was we asked for keywords from people, both on the demand and supply side. The question was simple. Please specify the keywords which corresponds to your, let's say, corresponds to areas or topics that you want to improve yourself. It was something like that. I can remember the wording clearly. So it's a matter of exchange. Like people can be learning experience designers. That means they want to share their expertise, knowledge, experience in particular fields. They can be learners, they can be mentors, project managers, researchers, sponsors, employers, internship providers, ambassadors, and like that. So there were at that time, there were about more than 2,000 keywords in the database, but I will show it. We are working on a platform at the moment. As you see, we did not narrow the scope just to technical issues. I mean, people want to exchange many different things based on their experiences in life. Robotics is part of it. History of science is part of it. But at the same time, there are lots of soft topics. I've just selected a few of them just to show the richness of the potential, let's say. So currently we are developing a platform. Sorry, some of them are in Turkish, but the idea is the ITU ecosystem includes about 200,000 people, including students, academic staff, the alumni. It's also possible to add, external stakeholders. But in about 3 or 4 weeks time, we will be sending emails to those 200,000 people, and we will ask for their keywords, their location. So I mean, that's a few examples from the page. So all those keywords, when people add, will be flowing on the main page like this. So we will be, it's like a river. So which will be reflecting, let's say, the potential of this ecosystem. So okay, that's the idea behind the human resources, or let's say learning analytics, if we are specifically talking about learning. There are a couple of ways that we can benefit from this potential. We made a distinction between volume business and value business when we tried to use this potential in ITU. Volume business means you have the keywords, you know where people are, you know their areas of interest, work, or expertise, whatever. So it is possible to develop different business models in collaboration with different units of the university. Like, for example, if you want to use that information for careers development, you have to work with that unit in the university. Or if you want to use it for example, providing places for internship, then you have to get in touch with the relevant center, and you have to develop a model, okay, for using this let's say database. Another way in terms of volume business was targeting specific segments of the ITU ecosystem for learning, research, and say other purposes based on the shared tendencies or shared interests of these people. For example, we were sending emails directly to people who are interested in specific, let's say, activities. We know that, for example, a guy is interested in artificial intelligence. We had another database, which is event management database. So we were able to monitor that guy, and we say, okay, in the past, you participated in an activity of the learning center. It was about artificial intelligence, and there is another one, let's say next month or next week. So come and join us. It was something like that. So, but we were also interested in the value business part. I mean, and learning stations, okay, was more relating that part, value business, okay, because we know how to use it for sending invitations, etc. But the question, how can we use this potential for creating value? How can we use it for example, co-creation processes? How can we encourage people use it for example, innovation and, for example, entrepreneurship and things like that? So when you move up to the higher order thinking and learning, etc., you need something different, okay? Because you can arrange activities for several years, but when you focus on value, we needed something different, and that was the connection to active learning, another keyword for me today, because without, so what does that mean? Basically, okay, there's a huge amount of literature on that, and it's connected to many different educational theories, etc. But in simple, it's an umbrella term, which means you have to engage with learners, like, for example, linking learning to real-life practices, taking the responsibility of learning, exploration, inquiry, reflection, and it is self-motivated. It is different from being a passive recipient of knowledge, basically. So that's very important. That was very important for us in terms of using the potential in the Binom database. There are many, techniques, tools, methods for active learning. You can place them on a continuum with some very simple ones like think, pair, share activities, etc. So you can easily engage with students, for example, in a traditional classroom. You can arrange some simple, let's say, exercises to engage with them. But at the other end of the spectrum, we have relatively more sophisticated methods like project-based learning and problem-based learning, etc. So all of them are collectively known as, let's say, active learning. So, and this portfolio is growing every day thanks to information. And that was the model we developed at the end. Okay, it's basically it's a construct. It's a tool, or I can say that it's a planning tool for designing different types of learning experiences. But the thing is, everyone within the ecosystem can design it, including students, academics, administrative staff, and most importantly, the members of the alumni network. And secondly, anyone interested in these learning experiences, any learning experience, can join it. Okay, so it works both sides, both demand and supply. So how does it work? Perhaps I can share the guide, which I will also share colleagues, EELISA colleagues earlier. It was a brief summary of the ITU learning station model. It explains briefly, step by step. It also includes some checklists, because design of these learning stations is a project by definition. So that means it has an initiation phase, it has a planning phase, an execution phase, and it has a closure phase. So we have some checklist for each stage, so that learning experience designers can check their, let's say, tasks. It is something like that. Okay, on the left, it's a learning outcome based approach. Okay, for example, in the EELISA at the moment, we are very much interested in SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of UN, and I know that UNESCO has a guide for incorporating SDGs into education. They have some, okay, very a very nice document, a guide on SDG related outcomes. For example, if you want to incorporate any learning outcome relating SDG, okay, you can make it part of this design. Here we have the learning materials, its content and sub-content. For example, if you need something else from, let's say, URACE learning outcomes, you can make it part of this experience. So it's totally up to the designer. It's totally, relating the goal of this experience design. And on the top, we have many different delivery modes. Why? Because there are numerous ways to deliver learning materials to your audience. Sometimes you give them some readings, invite people, share videos, and things like that. But one of the main issues about learning stations is that designers to use hands-on practices. So this is about using the upper levels of the Bloom taxonomy, right? We start from remembering, but at the end of the day, if you are talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, and okay, some novel contributions to the engineering field, for example, it's about creating, it's about evaluating, etc. So the designers of these experiences can arrange all these, let's say, modules according to their expected learning outcomes. I will not go into the details because I will share this with you, but as you know, we choose specific verbs according to Bloom taxonomy to specify these learning outcomes. Okay, and these are some of the options which we can use to deliver our learning materials. So all of these and many others can be easily added to your learning experience. And at the end of the design, of course, we also use it at undergraduate level. For example, many of our students are designing their own learning experiences in this way. In the case of Learning Center, for example, we announced the categories, the target audiences, okay, the learning outcomes, and so on. We had a form like that, so anyone could see the design and the let's say the expected outputs from these experiences. Okay, so I will go back to my I mean, we can talk about that, but okay, you'll already see those explanations. Okay, the tick marks means at the same time, for example, the blue ones show that the content is delivered online. They can be hybrid, which means you can, because it has a modular structure, okay, you can deliver a particular module online, a module online, or you can prefer to, okay, use another one in a physical learning environment. For a module, you can collaborate with, for example, a company. For another, you can, you're one of your for example, an alumni, for example, this is why we call them learning experience designer. And those designers, they don't need to be instructors, okay? They are more like project managers. This is why, for example, we developed a checklist according to project management, the phases of the project management life cycle. Okay, I can perhaps I can show you an example to make it more solid. Okay, this is an example from I'm sorry, this is in okay, it's not in Turkish. Okay, the designers specify okay, that was a case for in the field of cultural heritage conservation. Okay, it is a co-learning community. It's an external actor. As you see, there are expected learning outcomes from this experience, and that's how this designer, okay, made it. So these pictures are showing, these are pictures taken during these experiences. For example, this one is from the Technopark, the one in the middle, because we collaborated with a company that was about using additive manufacturing technology. And another issue is these, of course, in the case of ITU learning centers, we had sponsors because we had sponsors. That was a very easy way of communicating with or engaging with different companies from the industry because these are a very appropriate environments in terms of accessing talents, for example, instead of, reviewing lots of CVs, etc. This is a very interesting, very, let's say, result-oriented strategy to access talent within, for example, ITU. Okay, I'll show their motivations. We have some evidence for that. Okay, there are many others. I'll share the presentation with you. So some of them were, for example, digital learning stations. And one advantage for the digital ones was, of course, because we were able to develop a digital archive for these stations, which means they are was an advantage for us. There are also pilots from undergraduate courses. Some of them are theoretical courses, for example. Some of them are some applied ones. So this is, for example, word cloud, which is showing the feedback from students. That's how, for example, but I think there is another one here, just a second. Okay, these are some feedback from undergraduate students, and they say, okay, for the first time in life, they say, I thought about how to teach a subject, because we know by experience that it is the best way of learning, right? Because you learn much better when you teach something. And learning stations mean, because they design their own learning experiences, it's a really very high level, let's say, learning experience in terms of learning. Later, this is one of them, for example, Cultural Heritage Conservation Learning Community. They are using the ITU learning model. I think this is an Instagram reel. Just let's click on this, I think. So this is the environment. Okay, this is how they learn. This is, for example, in this case, we collaborated with a professor from another university. He's an expert in the field. Perhaps I can show the design of this experience. Okay, these are the learning outcomes. So he had 3 learning outcomes like this, and this is how he delivered the content. Okay, so as I said, there are many different options here. So, and later, okay, there is another project which is ongoing. In this case, we are working with a leading company in the steel industry. We are working with their metallurgy group, and at the moment, more than 150 engineers in the company are designing learning stations because we are developing their corporate university. They are designing courses on hydraulics, pneumatics, and things like that. Okay, that can be interesting because it's showing some qualitative feedback from the learning stations of the learning center. Okay, and it's important because it's showing the motivations of these stakeholders. For example, accessing knowledge, experience, and expertise that are hard to access in a traditional classroom environment, for example. These are, okay, like understanding interdisciplinary perspectives and problem solving. And we, as a strategy, because the whole concept is based on the shared interests of people, okay, we mix academics, students, administrative staff, and alumni. That's very important. We mix young people, okay, with more experienced people, because everybody wants to learn something new. Everybody wants to share something with others, okay, and especially incorporating alumni was, you know, very valuable for undergraduate or graduate students. Of course, we, in some cases, we target specific segments of the ITU community, like, for example, arranging, let's say, an experience on electrical cars. You may directly target PhD students, for example, who work on the topic. So it's totally up to you. On this, networking was very important for these people because they know each other, okay, they socialize, and that meant, for example, employment or internship opportunities for these people. Is consultancy, networking for consultancy, for example. That was the expectations of the alumni, for example, and some of them really started to work with each other. Certification of learning was very important for younger, for example, participants. Why? Because they want to increase their, let's say, chance in the market, in the employment market. Continuing professors were free for the alumni, okay, because we are a public university. But the thing is, because the whole concept is based on, you know, hands-on exercises, we have to keep the number of participants low. But that's also very interesting. Depending on demand, you can make it part of your income model in the university, because if there is high demand for a particular topic, what does that mean? You can easily integrate that, for example, demand with the continuing professional development, let's say, unit of your university. Being back to school, reunion with school was very motivating for these people. Sharing experience is also very important, especially in the later stages of the career, and things like that, okay? And especially in the case of old universities, this creates a really very difficult to imitate competitive advantage. I mean, that's really a very huge advantage. So, okay, it provides a huge, you know, very, you know, hierarchical structures, etc. So, you know, it's sometimes very difficult to make change on your, let's say, governing structures, etc. But in this case, I will talk about the strategy that we followed in that sense. So we placed these let's say, learning stations not within departments. We placed them as satellites that surround the university. So we directly targeted individuals based on shared interests. That was a very important strategy to make things work. Okay, so that's what we had in mind, okay, for future. Like, it's a combination of small number of courses for core competencies in the departments. Why? Because people learn from many different channels. So it's really, really very meaningless to keep them in traditional classrooms, plus a portfolio of competencies that is designed by students themselves according to the predefined tracks or requirements in each department. Okay, so it's like a journey for students to come up with a portfolio at the end, plus certified competencies acquired from external bodies in digital, physical, or hybrid learning environments, again, as defined by departments according to their needs. And the last part is very much relating the credentials discussion or micro-credentials discussion, because if any student or learner, let's say, certifies the experience with an acceptable level of quality, so why not make it part of his or her portfolio? So that's the general. So it's also possible to add, for example, the internship module here. Why? Because why, for example, do we do internship? Because for learning. If internship is learning, that means we should have some expectations, right? Learning outcomes from this experience. So that means you can also easily specify these outcomes according to the revised Bloom taxonomy. So and make it part of this let's say experience or this portfolio according to your specific needs. Okay, so what are the lessons learned for after all these pilots, especially in the industry, in the ITU Learning Center, or let's say graduate students, or excuse me, I'm looking for just a second. I'm sorry, where is my, yes, it's here. Okay. I'm sorry for that. Yes, it's here. Okay. There are some lessons learned, and I think they can be really very interesting and valuable for ELISA colleagues, ELISA students. It was an opportunity to question the thick boundary between pre-graduation and post-graduation ecosystems. Okay, and that's, in my view, that's very important for lifelong learning mindset, because our students become really valuable for us when they start their career. Okay, when they climb the career ladder, for example, and they become employers. Okay, they can share or exchange lots of let's say information with the other members of the ecosystem. So so the thinning the boundary between the pre-graduation and post-graduation ecosystem is very, very critical in terms of lifelong learning, let's say, approach. So learning stations was an opportunity for that. We were able to benefit from the high potential of the alumni. It was inclusive, participative, and democratic learning environments because students design these experiences themselves according to areas of their interests, and they are totally based on active learning. Anyone can be a learning experience designer. It works in physical, digital, or hybrid learning environments. For example, at undergraduate level, okay, we started in physical, okay, environments, but continued in digital ones. It was when the pandemic started, for example, and the feedback from students shows that the satisfaction from learning was really very high. I mean, it didn't differ, in short. Okay, we have the numbers for that. Access to external funding for high quality learning. External funding means accessing the resources of alumni, accessing the resources of company, because they are very much eager to be part of this experience for different reasons. Sometimes they want to do business with a prestigious university. Sometimes, okay, they want to be visible on social media. Sometimes they want to access, for example, talents, because learning stations are, very concentrated environments. So if you want to access talents in a university, so why not design a learning experience for these students? Okay, so it was important in terms of capacity building for project-based learning. Why? Because each learning station design, the first one, I mean, is a project by definition, so it requires project management skills. In my view, there is a high potential to integrate with the research and innovation ecosystem. Just you can change the name. Okay, they can be research stations, entrepreneurship stations, and others like conservation stations. In the cultural heritage case, let's say. But commitment of top management is very important because it requires deviation from status quo. I will show a graphic for that. And most importantly, it requires a shift in the role of academics. They need to be mentors rather than instructors. Okay, it's about exchanging knowledge and experience. And that was one of the challenges at times, but we tried to explain that these are really valuable opportunities for your own learning as well, because at the end of the day, it's a matter of power. So sharing power with students in the classroom requires the delegation of authority. But that's important. I mean, when I look back, in my view, two strategies were really very valuable for us, which made these learning stations work in the ITU case. As I said, we placed them at the periphery as satellites. That means we did not cope with the highly bureaucratic structure of an old university. We directly targeted individuals, okay, because we have the keywords. We have information about their areas of interest, their experiences, in both ways, both demand and supply, let's say. And secondly, that strategy is also very important in my view. That's how innovations setting, right? There are innovators, there are early adopters, early majority, late majority, and we have the laggards in any social environments. And we targeted, innovators and early adopters, in which in total corresponds to about, let's say, 15% of members in any community, because they are innovative, they are more ready to take risks, they are more open to new ideas, they are open-minded, and so on. And it really works like that when you want to, disseminate innovations in any let's say, track. Okay, so for ELISA, I mean, for the specific case of ELISA, in my view, ELISA communities of learning can be created and sustained more easily than if we combine human resources analytics or learning analytics with active learning mindset and tools. Here, collaboration with externals is very important, especially the alumni, because they are ready to collaborate with their university. It's part of their solidarity. It's part of their, because they want to, reunion with the university is very important for these people. And it's not just, donating something. We offer, this is a value offer for these people. We say, let's co-create together. This is something different from donation. We say, come and we will co-create together. And that's something more attractive for these people. It's important in terms of accessing external funding, but in my view, it should be combined with a well-thought, formulated sponsorship system. Lifelong learning can be supported. That's very important. And modular arrangement of the learning landscape with learning outcome-based approach can provide a common methodology for the recognition of multiple forms of learning. Be they within the university or outside the university, be they digital or physical, it doesn't really matter. If the overall approach is learning outcome-based, things are more likely to work smoothly. So we have some inputs for the ELISA case, like we have to think about the URACE learning outcomes. We have to think about, for example, credentials. We have to make a connection with ELISA community activities. We have internships, but basically they are learning experiences. That means we should expect some learning outcomes from those internships. So it's all about, placing these pieces of learning experiences on a modular, let's say, learning landscape. the same with, for example, challenge-based learning. It's all about designing or choosing your, delivery modes. So I'm about to complete. Julia, this is the last one. This is the most meaningful one.
Yes,
so,
but before you end your presentation, we have a question from Ike actually.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I can do it at the end. No, I'll do it at the end. Just present your last slide. I was just not sure.
Okay. This is the last and most important slide. Okay. At the end of the day, what is a learning station? This is a learning station. So it's totally up to your imagination. Okay, up to your creativity. It is relating your targets in life, career targets, and others. So it's just a plane, an empty plane like that. So you can create anything on that, let's say, modular space. So thank you very much. It's been already 40 minutes, so I'll stop the presentation here. Okay. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Emrah. So now you have time to ask your question.
It's just one thing that came to my mind, because I think this project-based learning is super cool, and we have also surveys with alumni. So after they have entered into their first job, they are asked what skills were you missing when you entered your first job, and many of them say this practical application is missing. However, when I go with this information to our teachers, many of them say, yeah, but we are a research university. We teach them how to do research. We don't do practical projects at our university. We teach them how to think. Do you have any recommendations how to deal with this? Because there's at university, I mean, in general, we have two different types. We have universities and we have schools, and they are fighting for, I mean, the schools are a lot more practical than the universities, but the universities want to keep this academic rigor, and they don't want to do practical things. Do you have recommendations how to deal with this? What to respond to these people?
I mean, this is something independent of different, learning stations do not really stick to any, educational theory or educational. Yes, active learning is, it's very popular around the world. So for some well-known reasons, but I mean, it totally depends on, the priorities, the perspectives of the experienced designers. I mean, if in some fields, so it's also context specific, because there are different requirements, different expectations in different departments, in different disciplines. So probably they have to, they can arrange or design these experiences according to their own requirements. For example, studying literature is something different from studying, for example, chemical engineering. So, but this is just a planning tool, It's a planning tool for these people, be they students, academics, or externals. It doesn't really matter. It's just about, it's about creativity. It's like a planning tool, so it can work in any setting if their priorities, for example, focus on, let's say, more theoretical constructs, or higher order thinking, learning outcomes accordingly, and they will choose the delivery modes accordingly. So, so I think it's context specific. It's just a planning tool. So, in my view, but this is a learning by doing process. For example, we target innovative, open-minded academics, students. Same with students. I mean, those percentages are not different for the students as well. And some people are more likely to try new things. They are relatively more innovative, more, let's say, they're interested in, deviating from status quo, etc. We choose those people, we target those people, and we work with them, because this is a learning by doing process. It's not so easy. So but when we work once, they are like ambassadors of learning stations. It works like that. So this is why, if any one is interested in designing something like that, we work with them, and we do it once, because I mean, in the following phases, people do it themselves, be they students, academics, or it doesn't matter, anyone within the ecosystem. So in that sense, this is an open call for all colleagues, ELISA colleagues, ELISA students, ELISA, for example, project teams. Okay, if you are interested in designing something like that, just contact us and we can work together. We can include externals, we can include companies, NGOs. It's totally up to your imagination and your expected learning outcomes. I mean, once you are clear about the scope, I think things work.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? We have only 4 minutes left, so.
I can check the Miro board. Do we have something on that? I'm not sure. Oh, yes, there are some. Okay, no questions or comments as far as I see. Just a second. Where is it? Okay. But no problem. I will keep this board open. Okay. So you can add your comments. You can add your questions. We can keep on, communicating over the Miro board, or you can directly. Okay, this is. Let me share my email address. And this is the ELISA email address. Okay.
Heike, would you like to say something about these CSU in Australia?
Yeah, so there was a webinar some weeks ago on this, and I think it's very interesting. They have designed a very new degree program. They have split it completely, the learning, into online learning and offline learning, and they have a big topic tree. So you have I think over 500 topics where students can choose themselves which topic they want to learn, but they learn it online. And during the studies, they only do project-based learning for 1.5 years. I think that was very, very cool. So it's basically the learner decides what he or she wants to learn. And they were also voted to one of the emerging leaders in engineering education by an MIT study. So I think I just posted the link so you can check out the website. It would be also of interest.
So, all right. If there is no question, we only have 2 minutes, so it's time for me to say goodbye. So thanks again, Emrah, for these very, very interesting insights. And again, thank you all for having spent your lunchtime today with us. If you have any further questions or want to learn more about ELISA communities, please write us an email to elisa@fau.de. I put it in the chat as well. And we will meet again in 2 weeks. The invitation for the next event, as well as a presentation, all the material of today will be sent to you via follow-up mail. So thanks again. Have a wonderful weekend. And please, if you have any questions to ELISA, just write us an email. Thank you so much. Thanks, Emrah.